Ben Simmons, you got to show up and play some defense. The shooting and all that stuff is a different category. There is no excuse for him not to be an elite defensive player.
And Kyrie's been fighting through screens, getting rebounds, and getting blocks too. But they're 0-3 their last 3 games, and their 2 best players have 210 points.
Guys, I'm not going to say that coming into this season that I had high hopes for the Brooklyn Nets or anything like that, but what I will say is that it's kind of hard to believe that this team is where they are right now. If we go back a few seasons, this is a team that was literally so close to making the Eastern Conference Finals. In those playoffs, Kevin Durant was must-see TV. Last season, the Brooklyn Nets would go on to get swept in the first round by the Boston Celtics. It was a really weird playoff series for Brooklyn because though they were talented, they went on to get swept by a Boston Celtics team that ended up surprising everybody. There were a few things that were abundantly clear when the Brooklyn Nets got swept by the Boston Celtics last year. And one of those things was that the Brooklyn Nets simply didn't have enough fight. If you don't believe me, just ask my guy Blake Griffin. He was like one of the only players on the roster that showed any sort of effort. It's wild to think that D'Lo and Sean Marks had this team showing the fight that they covet today in 2019. And now instead of having it, they're searching for it in all the wrong places. Unironically, Ben Simmons and Jared Dudley also had this whole really weird playoff beef back in 2019. Now, instead of beefing with Ben, the Brooklyn Nets are trying to exhaust all options to make this thing work. I think one of the biggest problems for Brooklyn right now is that when they traded for James Harden, they gave up a lot. While they gave up a lot, they also got back a lot. They got back one of the most electric offensive players that the game has ever seen. They got back an MVP caliber player and also a superstar. You see, when the Nets traded for Ben Simmons, they gave up a lot and they really didn't get back that much, at least with Ben playing the way that he's playing right now. In the James Harden and Ben Simmons trade, Philly would receive James Harden and Paul Millsap, while Brooklyn would receive Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, a 2022 first-round pick that was unprotected, and a 2027 first-round pick that was protected. When the Nets traded James Harden, it was clear that they would need another playmaker. And while they hoped that playmaker would come in the form of Ben Simmons, he just hasn't been everything that they would have expected him to be. You see, as good or as bad as James Harden was with the Brooklyn Nets, one thing that he constantly did was apply pressure to defenses. Love him or hate him, James Harden is still one of the best playmakers in the game of basketball today. And even if he's exerting very little effort, you still have to guard him because he's a threat to knock down the 3-ball. Something that Ben Simmons is unfortunately not. I love Ben Simmons, but with him on the floor in Brooklyn, oftentimes it feels like the Nets are playing 4-on-5 on offense. While I've noticed some improvement lately, he still has a long ways to go. There are a lot of times where he'll just take the ball up the court and then hand it off. I'm seriously not exaggerating. There are a lot of times where Ben Simmons will just pick up his dribble for no reason other than to give the ball to somebody else. And it's honestly pretty heartbreaking to see because we all know how good Ben Simmons can be. And in this instance, I'm talking about how good that he can be and was even without a jump shot. It's clear that the Ben Simmons that we're watching right now in Brooklyn is not the same Ben Simmons that we got to witness in Philly. It's not the same Ben Simmons that was averaging 16 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists, while being an all-star and DPOY candidate. So far in Brooklyn, the defense has been hot and cold. We'll see instances like this where he'll get a big-time steal and then hand the ball off to Durant, and then all of a sudden the handoffs are cool because Durant's going on to dunk the ball and tie the game. But unfortunately, a lot of times early in the season, it's felt as if his defense just hasn't been good enough to feel like you're playing 4-on-5 on offense. I mean, there are literally clips out there of this guy airballing layups, which I think is incredibly unfortunate because we all know how good that he can be. While we're here, have you guys seen the clip of Kyrie quite literally begging this guy to shoot the basketball?
Now Irving sees a seam, drops it off, Simmons dishes.
Imagine having teammates begging you to shoot the basketball. Usually people shoot too much. In Ben's case, he's not shooting enough. And what's so frustrating about everything is that he's the 6'9" athlete that's incredibly nimble, coordinated, and has all of the tools in the world to be phenomenal. Now, I don't want to be too hard on Ben because in the words of Kyrie Irving, this guy hasn't played NBA basketball in 2 years.
So you guys keep coming in here asking me, like, what about Ben? What about Ben? And it's just, he hasn't played in 2 years. Give him a fucking chance. You know what I mean? We stay on his stay on. I wish I could say other words because I'm from Jersey, but we stay on him. And like, you just stay on him, and we're just here to give him positive affirmations while he's out there and just let him hoop. You know, and then while he's hooping and getting back into it, we're going to have to really gel as a team in order to learn how to win as a group, you know.
While I'm willing to give Ben some time, which he may or may not deserve, I can understand how some of the early returns have been frustrating. The Brooklyn Nets would start this season off by facing off against my New Orleans Pelicans. The Brooklyn Nets would go on to get destroyed this game, and Ben Simmons would end up fouling out. After fouling out, Kyrie would say, "We told him in the locker room. He's a valuable piece for us and we need him out there. Fouling out is not an option." After hearing this, shortly after, Ben Simmons would go on to foul out again against Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies. Personally, I didn't think this was a foul, but you guys can let me know what you think down in the comments below. This just looks like some premium bait from Ja Morant. At one point, things were so bad for Ben that he had 17 points and 14 fouls on the season. One of the biggest conundrums that the Brooklyn Nets face is that if you play Ben Simmons with Nick Claxton, then you're going to have some very bad shooting. And well, if you take Nick Claxton off the floor, then is Ben Simmons or whoever you're playing at the 5 going to be able to hold their own at the 5 position? The Brooklyn Nets have struggled to secure any sort of defensive board this season. They're currently dead last in defensive rebounding, averaging 29.5 a game. Honestly, I'd argue that this team could use a 6'9" athletic point guard that was able to secure a lot of boards. Or maybe a 6'3" or 6'4" guard that played kind of similar to Josh Hart. Or maybe just Andre Drummond. Wait, while the Nets' defensive rebounding sucks, so does their defense in general. They are currently the 29th ranked team in defensive rating. Guys, there are only 30 teams in the NBA. The only team worse than them, and it breaks my heart to say this, is the Detroit Pistons by 0.2 points. If I'm Detroit at this point, I'm just unleashing Jalen Duren and letting him fix our defensive rating by himself, or at least seeing what he can do. Early on, he's looking like somebody that can develop into a force on both sides of the basketball, especially defense. After losing to the Pacers, Nets reporter Nick Friedel would call the loss one of the worst that he's seen over the past few years, stating that they got out-hustled and outplayed by a Pacers team without Miles Turner on a night where they badly needed a win. Is this a bad time to mention that the Pacers scored 125 and this was a back-to-back for them? After this L to the Pacers, Ben Simmons would go on to say that the team had a players-only meeting.
Post-game.
It was honest. You know, we had a conversation that obviously I'm not going to talk about, but it was honest. And, you know, that's what winning teams do. Hold each other accountable. You're able to, you know, be open and talk to your teammates, you know, and respect that and, you know, be men.
Guys, we are only 6 or so games into the season. He would also go on to say that he feels like the Nets can be one of the best teams in the league. While Ben Simmons has a lot of hope, it seems as if some of the fans don't. According to NY Post Lewis, the Nets are dead last in the NBA when it comes to season ticket sales. And at this point, it's really hard to blame Nets fans. This whole team has become entirely too hard to root for. With Brooklyn, sometimes I wonder how much Kevin Durant's trade request this summer affected this team. I know nobody needs the reminder, but to quote Shams, in a meeting with Nets owner Joe Tsai, Kevin Durant reiterated his trade request and informed Tsai that he needs to choose between Durant or the pairing of general manager Sean Marks and coach Steve Nash. Kevin Durant informed Tsai that he does not have faith in the Nets' direction. The meeting was described as transparent and professional with a clear message: keep me or the GM and coach. Imagine going through this summer and then everybody being like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll run it back. When I saw Steve Nash get ejected this season, I felt for him, but man, I'm just not sure that he's head coach material. The players don't really respect them and have a lack of faith in them. And then there's that whole Cam Thomas thing, where this young talented player is racking up DNPs and is visibly frustrated. Oh, and by the way, I didn't talk about the lack of adjustments in putrid scheme. I know that Kenny Atkinson is somewhere, probably Golden State, just smiling, thanking everybody that he doesn't have to deal with this mess in Brooklyn. With Brooklyn, it's hard to doubt that we'll see improvement, but just how much will we see? This team has a number of players that are still fighting to get to absolute 100%. For the Nets, they just kind of have to hope that that happens before the season's over. In such a short season, this team has really already seen it all. Even their owner publicly calling out Kyrie Irving on Twitter for anti-Semitic disinformation, saying that some things are simply bigger than basketball, in which I'd completely have to agree. Guys, in the comments below, let me know what you think of everything. Clicking the video on the screen right now is a great way to support my channel. I'm GetLikeCoop, bringing you guys the scoop. Until our next upload.